The void of space stretched endlessly around the human vessel Defiance, its sleek black hull barely visible against the star-speckled darkness. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge, her weathered hands gripping the command rail, as she watched the tactical display with grim determination. The ship's AI, Arya, hummed softly in the background, processing countless streams of data with the efficiency that only human engineering could achieve. "Captain, we're receiving another surrender demand from the Zephyrian Empire," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. His young face showed the strain of the past 3 weeks, ever since humanity had declared independence from the galactic overlords who had ruled them for 2 centuries. Sarah's jaw tightened. The Zephyrians had controlled Earth and its colonies with an iron fist, treating humans as little more than clever pets capable of maintaining their technology. For generations, humans had been forced to serve as engineers, mechanics, and scientists for a species that had long ago lost the ability to innovate. The Zephyrians had grown complacent, relying entirely on the creative minds of their human subjects while their own culture stagnated in luxury and arrogance. "What's their offer this time?" Sarah asked, though she already knew she wouldn't accept whatever terms they proposed. "Complete surrender of all human settlements, return of stolen imperial technology, and execution of all resistance leaders," Torres read from his screen. In exchange, they promised to be merciful to the remaining human population. A bitter laugh escaped Sarah's lips. Merciful? The same mercy they'd shown when they'd bombed the Mars colonies for requesting basic rights. The same mercy they displayed when they'd turned Earth's children into indentured servants from birth. "Send them our response," Sarah said firmly. "Humanity kneels to no one." The bridge crew exchanged glances of both pride and fear. They all knew what this meant. The Defiance was humanity's last hope, the culmination of decades of secret research and hidden engineering projects. While the Zephyrians had grown fat and lazy on human labor, humans had been quietly learning, adapting, and improving upon every piece of technology they'd been forced to maintain. "Captain," called out Commander Hayes from the tactical station, "long-range sensors are picking up the Imperial fleet. They're dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system." Sarah's heart began to race, but her voice remained steady. "How many ships?" Hayes's face went pale as he studied his readouts. "Ma'am, it's the entire 7th Imperial Fleet. Over 300 vessels, including the flagship Dominator. Admiral Kethvar is commanding personally." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of electronics. Everyone knew the reputation of the 7th Fleet. They were the Empire's elite, the force that had conquered star systems and crushed rebellions across the galaxy. Admiral Kethvar himself was a legend among the Zephyrian military, a tactical genius who had never lost a battle in his 3-century career. 300 ships against one," whispered Torres, his voice barely audible. "Then the odds are almost even," Sarah replied with a slight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her crew looked at her with expressions ranging from confusion to admiration. They trusted their captain completely, but even the most optimistic among them struggled to see how one ship could face the Empire's mightiest fleet. Sarah activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. In approximately 6 hours, we will engage the Imperial 7th Fleet. I won't lie to you, they outnumber us 300 to 1. But they've made one critical mistake. They think they know what human engineering is capable of." She paused, looking around at her bridge crew, seeing the mixture of fear and determination in their eyes. "For 200 years, we've maintained their ships, improved their weapons, and fixed their mistakes. They've grown dependent on our minds while forgetting that creativity is humanity's greatest weapon. Today, we show them what happens when humans fight for their freedom." The Defiance was unlike any ship that had ever existed. On the surface, it appeared to be a standard Imperial heavy cruiser, one of thousands built using Zephyrian designs. But beneath its familiar exterior lay innovations that the Empire couldn't even comprehend. Human engineers had spent decades secretly modifying and improving every system, creating technologies that push the boundaries of known science. Commander Hayes pulled up the ship's technical specifications on his private screen, marveling once again at what human ingenuity had achieved. The ship's primary weapon wasn't the standard plasma cannons found on Imperial vessels, but something entirely new, a quantum disruption array that could tear apart matter at the subatomic level. The shields weren't simple energy barriers, but adaptive systems that learned and evolved with each incoming attack. Most impressive of all was the ship's AI system, Aria. Unlike the simple automated systems used by the Empire, Aria was a true artificial intelligence, capable of independent thought and creative problem-solving. The Zephyrians had always feared artificial intelligence, believing it posed a threat to their control. But humans had embraced it, creating a partnership between organic and artificial minds that multiplied their capabilities exponentially. Aria, analysis of the incoming fleet, Sarah commanded. The AI's voice filled the bridge, melodious and distinctly human-sounding. Fleet composition confirmed as 300 vessels. Captain, standard Imperial formation suggests they expect minimal resistance. Their approach pattern indicates overconfidence. They're not even bothering with advanced screening formations. Sarah nodded grimly. The Empire's arrogance would be their downfall. They saw humans as clever slaves, not as equals capable of strategic thinking. What's our tactical assessment? Based on current approach vectors and known Imperial doctrine, I calculate a 73.6% probability of complete fleet destruction within the first hour of engagement. Aria replied calmly. The bridge crew exchanged startled glances. Even knowing their ship's capabilities, such confidence seemed impossible. Aria, Hayes interrupted. Did you mean a 73.6% probability that we would be destroyed? Negative, Commander. I calculate a 73.6% probability that we will destroy their entire fleet within 1 hour. The probability increases to 94.2% if engagement extends beyond 2 hours. Lieutenant Torres shook his head in amazement. How was that possible? The Empire has not faced adaptive technology for over a century, Aria explained. Their tactical doctrine is rigid and predictable. More importantly, their crews have no experience with true innovation. They follow predetermined patterns and lack the creative flexibility that has always been humanity's advantage. Sarah studied the approaching fleet on the main display. Each ship represented centuries of imperial might, filled with warriors who considered themselves the masters of the galaxy. But she saw something different. She saw stagnation. The Empire had grown so comfortable in their dominance that they'd stopped evolving, stopped learning. Captain, reported the sensor operator, the Imperial fleet is broadcasting on all frequencies. They're demanding our immediate surrender and threatening to glass every human world if we don't comply. Let them threaten, Sarah replied coldly. Fear has always been their primary weapon. But fear only works against those who have something to lose. She was thinking of Earth, of the billions of humans living under Imperial rule, of her own daughter, somewhere in the Sol system, probably watching the news feeds and praying for her mother's safe return. Sarah had volunteered for this mission, knowing she might never see her family again. But if the Defiance succeeded, if they could prove that humanity was no longer helpless, then every sacrifice would be worthwhile. All stations report ready, Captain, announced Hayes. Weapons charged, shields at maximum, all systems showing optimal performance. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of human history on her shoulders. Then, let's remind the galaxy what happens when you underestimate humanity. The Imperial fleet continued its approach, their formation perfect and intimidating. Admiral Kethvar, aboard the flagship Dominator, was undoubtedly confident in his overwhelming numerical advantage. He'd crushed rebellions before with far smaller forces. To him, this was likely just another minor annoyance to be swept aside on his path to greater glory. But he was about to learn that humans were no longer the compliant servants the Empire remembered. They were about to discover that 2 centuries of oppression had forged humanity into something harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous than their former masters. The Defiance hung in space like a predator waiting to strike, its human crew ready to write a new chapter in galactic history. The Empire's mightiest fleet was approaching, confident in their superiority and utterly unprepared for what was about to happen. In the depths of space, one human ship prepared to change everything. The tactical display showed the enemy fleet spreading out in their standard intimidation formation, a wall of steel and firepower designed to break the spirit of any opponent before the first shot was fired. But Sarah Chun felt no fear, only a cold determination that had been building for 200 years of human servitude. "Time to engagement?" she asked. 4 hours, 37 minutes at current approach speed, reported Hayes. Sarah nodded and settled into her command chair. "All hands, this is the captain. We go to battle stations in 4 hours. Use the time to rest and prepare. What we do today will echo through history for generations to come." As the crew began their final preparations, the Defiance continued its silent vigil, a lone sentinel standing between tyranny and freedom. The Empire's greatest fleet approached with overwhelming confidence, unaware that they were flying into a confrontation that would shatter their understanding of power itself. The revolution was about to begin. Admiral Keth Var stood in the command center of the Imperial flagship Dominator, his reptilian features twisted into an expression of mild annoyance. The Zephyrian admiral was ancient by most standards, his scale hide bearing the marks of 3 centuries of military service. His 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern on his elongated skull, glowed with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated his noble bloodline. "Report on the human vessel," he commanded, his voice carrying the natural authority of one born to rule. Sub-Commander Veltar, a younger Zephyrian whose scales still held their vibrant purple coloring, consulted his display panel. "It appears to be a single heavy cruiser, Admiral. Standard Imperial design, designation unknown. Approximately 800 meters in length, consistent with Class 7 specifications." Keth Var's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. One ship, one pathetic human vessel thinks to challenge the might of the Empire. He turned to address the bridge crew, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast command center. "Perhaps the humans have forgotten their place in the natural order. We shall remind them." The Dominator was a ship that struck fear into the hearts of entire star systems. Nearly 3 kilometers long, bristling with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes, it was a monument to Imperial power. Its crew of 5,000 Zephyrians represented the finest military minds in the galaxy, trained from birth in the art of war and conquest. "Shall I order the fleet to attack formation?" asked Veltar, his claws hovering over the tactical controls. Keth Var waved one of his 4 arms dismissively. "Unnecessary. Signal the 3rd Squadron to move forward and disable the human ship. We want prisoners for interrogation. The rest of the fleet will maintain observation distance. No need to waste ammunition on such an insignificant target." The 3rd Squadron consisted of 30 heavy cruisers, each one a match for any ship in the human fleet that had existed before the rebellion. Their crews were eager for action after the long journey from the Imperial core worlds. To them, this was less a battle than a training exercise. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Chun watched the enemy formation with calculating eyes. The Imperial fleet was doing exactly what Arya had predicted. They were treating this as a minor police action rather than a serious military engagement. "They're sending a screening force," reported Commander Hayes. 30 ships moving to engagement range. The main fleet is hanging back. "Perfect," Sarah murmured. "They're dividing their forces." "Arya, tactical assessment." The AI's voice filled the bridge with quiet confidence. "The approaching squadron is using standard intimidation formation Alpha 7. Their spacing is optimal for devastating lesser opponents, but creates significant vulnerabilities against adaptive weapon systems." "Shall I highlight target priorities?" "Do it," Sarah confirmed. The tactical display lit up with targeting solutions that seemed almost too precise to believe. Arya had analyzed not just the positions and movements of each ship, but their shield harmonics, weapon charging cycles, even the psychological profiles of their commanders based on historical battle data. "Captain," interrupted Lieutenant Torres from communications, "we're receiving a transmission from the Imperial Squadron leader." "Put it through." The main screen flickered, and the image of a Zephyrian squadron commander appeared. His scales were bright green with golden highlights, indicating a warrior caste of significant rank. When he spoke, his voice carried the casual arrogance that humans had learned to hate. "Human vessel, you are commanded to surrender immediately. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your ship and the execution of your crew. You have 60 seconds to comply." Sarah stood slowly, allowing her full presence to fill the screen as she responded. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the human vessel Defiance. I have a counter-proposal. Withdraw your forces immediately and return to Imperial space. Any aggressive action will be met with overwhelming force." The Zephyrian commander's mandibles clicked in what was clearly laughter. "You dare threaten the Imperial Navy with a single obsolete cruiser? Human arrogance knows no bounds. Very well, you have chosen destruction. All ships attack formation. Disable their engines, but leave the rest intact. The Empire wants prisoners." The transmission ended, and Sarah turned back to her crew. "All hands, battle stations. This is not a drill. Prepare for combat." Throughout the Defiance, humans moved with practiced efficiency to their assigned positions. In the engineering sections, teams of technicians made final adjustments to systems that the Empire couldn't even imagine. The quantum disruption array powered up with a sound like distant thunder, while the adaptive shield generators began their complex initialization sequences. "Squadron approaching at attack speed," reported Hayes. "Range, 200,000 kilometers, and closing. They're charging weapons." Sarah settled into her command chair, her fingers dancing over the control panels with the skill of someone who had spent her entire life mastering human technology. "Arya, activate all defensive systems. Begin evasive maneuvers pattern Delta 9. The Defiance suddenly accelerated at impossible angles, moving in ways that should have crushed its crew under gravitational forces. But the ship's internal gravity manipulation systems, another human innovation, kept everyone safely at their stations. To the approaching Imperial ships, it must have looked like magic. "Impossible," breathed Subcommander Veltar aboard the Dominator. "That acceleration profile, no ship should be able to maneuver like that without killing its crew." Admiral Kethvar leaned forward, his four eyes focusing intently on the tactical display. "What are the humans using for inertial compensation?" "Unknown, Admiral. Our sensors show gravitational anomalies around their vessel that don't match any known technology." For the first time since the engagement began, Kethvar felt a flicker of unease. The Empire's intelligence on human capabilities was apparently incomplete. Back aboard the Defiance, the crew watched in amazement as their ship danced between the incoming fire from the Imperial Squadron. Plasma bolts that should have vaporized them passed harmlessly through empty space as the ship twisted and turned with impossible grace. "Return fire," commanded Sarah. "Target their lead vessel. Arya, full power to the quantum array." What happened next defied everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about space combat. Instead of the expected plasma bolts or torpedo launches, the Defiance simply aimed. A beam of energy invisible to conventional sensors reached out across space and touched the lead Imperial cruiser. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the enemy ship simply came apart. Not explosively, not dramatically, but with the quiet efficiency of matter forgetting how to hold itself together. The vessel's atomic bonds dissolved at the quantum level, and 300 Zephyrian warriors became scattered particles in the void. The Imperial Squadron's formation wavered as panic set in. They'd never seen a weapon that could simply unmake a ship at the molecular level. Their training had prepared them for conventional warfare, not for facing technology that might as well have been magic. "What happened to the retribution?" demanded the squadron commander over the emergency channel. "Unknown, sir. One moment it was there, the next it just wasn't. No explosion, no debris field. It's like the ship just stopped existing." Aboard the Dominator, Admiral Kethvar stared at his tactical display with growing alarm. One of his cruisers had simply vanished from the screen. His instruments showed no energy discharge, no weapon signature that matched anything in Imperial databases. Analysis, he barked at his science officer. "Admiral, I'm reading quantum fluctuations at the molecular level where their ship was positioned. It appears the vessel underwent some form of controlled atomic dissolution. Impossible. No weapon exists with that capability. Sir, the humans appear to have developed one." The Defiance struck again, and another Imperial ship dissolved into its component atoms. Then another. The quantum disruption array could fire once every 30 seconds, and each shot was perfectly lethal. There were no shields against it, no armor that could resist it, no defensive maneuver that could avoid it. "Withdraw!" screamed the Imperial squadron commander. "All ships, emergency retreat. Full reverse." But the Defiance was faster, more maneuverable, and utterly relentless. Arya calculated firing solutions within human precision while the ship's human crew worked in perfect harmony with their artificial partner. One by one, the Imperial ships began to disappear. "Sir, the squadron is taking heavy casualties," reported Veltar, his voice shaking with something the Zephyrian Empire hadn't felt in centuries: fear. "I can see that," Kethvar snarled. "Signal the fleet. Full attack formation. All ships, maximum speed." "Sir, perhaps we should consider no retreat," the Admiral roared. "We are the Imperial Navy. We do not flee from a single human vessel, no matter what weapons they possess." But even as he gave the order, Kethvar felt doubt gnawing at his mind. The humans had clearly developed technology far beyond what Imperial intelligence had reported. How long had they been preparing? What other surprises did they have waiting? The remaining ships of the squadron limped back toward the main fleet, but only 12 of the original 30 made it to safety. 18 ships had simply ceased to exist, their crews not even having time to understand what had killed them. "Captain," reported Hayes with undisguised awe in his voice, "the Imperial squadron is retreating. We've eliminated 18 enemy vessels with 0 damage to ourselves." Sarah nodded grimly. "That was just the opening move. Now they'll bring everything they have." On the main display, the full Imperial fleet began to move. 300 ships of war, representing the combined might of a galactic empire, turning toward one human vessel with murder in their electronic hearts. All ships attack speed. Admiral Kethvar commanded. "I want that human ship reduced to atomic particles. Show them the price of defying the Empire." The greatest fleet in galactic history surged forward like an avalanche of steel and fury. But aboard the Defiance, Captain Sarachon smiled coldly. The Empire was about to learn that their former slaves had become something far more dangerous than they could imagine. The real battle was about to begin. Arya's calm voice filled the bridge as the enemy fleet approached. "Captain, I'm detecting weapon signatures from approximately 300 vessels. Multiple plasma cannon arrays, quantum torpedo tubes, and gravitational mine dispensers. Total firepower equivalent to a small star going nova." "Can we handle it?" asked Commander Hayes, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Affirmative," Arya replied with the confidence that only an artificial intelligence could possess. Initiating combat protocol Omega-7. Prepare for full engagement. The Defiance began to change. Hull panels slid apart to reveal weapon systems that had never appeared on any Imperial blueprint. Shield generators hummed to life with frequencies that resonated in dimensions the Empire didn't even know existed. The ship's fusion cores ramped up to power levels that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. "Here they come," whispered Torres. Sarah gripped her command chair and smiled fiercely. Then, Let's show them what humanity can do when we're fighting for our freedom. The space around the Defiance erupted into chaos as 300 Imperial ships opened fire simultaneously. Plasma bolts streaked through the void like angry stars, each one carrying enough energy to level a city. Quantum torpedoes twisted reality as they flew, their exotic matter warheads designed to tear holes in the fabric of space itself. Gravitational mines bloomed into existence, creating localized distortions that could crush a ship into a singularity. But the Defiance was no longer where it appeared to be. Dimensional displacement active, reported Arya calmly, even as the ship seemed to dance between the incoming fire like a ghost. Enemy targeting solutions are consistently 3.7 seconds behind our actual position. Lieutenant Torres stared at his instruments in amazement. The ship's sensors showed them moving through space normally, but the quantum signature indicated something impossible. They were slightly out of phase with normal reality, existing in a dimensional pocket that made them nearly untouchable. "How is this possible?" he breathed. Commander Hayes grinned fiercely as he worked his tactical station. "Dimensional engineering. We've been working on it for 50 years, ever since we figured out that the Zephyrians never bothered to explore quantum mechanics beyond the basics. The theoretical foundation had come from human physicists who had spent their lives maintaining Imperial equipment while secretly studying the underlying principles. Dr. Elena Vasquez on Luna Base had been the first to crack the mathematics of controlled dimensional displacement. Dr. Marcus Webb on Titan Station had developed the exotic matter containment systems. Hundreds of human scientists, working in secret across dozens of worlds, had contributed pieces to the puzzle. "Target acquired," announced Hayes. "Imperial Battleship Vengeance, flagship of the 4th Battle Group." "Fire," Sarah commanded. The quantum disruption array pulsed, and another Imperial ship simply ceased to exist. But this time, Arya had targeted the fuel storage systems specifically. The battleship's antimatter containment failed catastrophically, creating a brief new star in the void that consumed 3 nearby cruisers in its fury. 4 ships with 1 shot, Hayes reported with grim satisfaction. The chain reaction took out their entire formation center. Aboard the Dominator, Admiral Kethvar watched 4 ships vanish from his tactical display and felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of warfare: helplessness. His fleet was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. "Sir, our targeting computers cannot achieve a lock," reported his weapons officer. "The human ship appears to be using some form of dimensional shielding. Our weapons pass through empty space while their ship occupies a slightly different quantum state." "Then, stop trying to target them directly," Kethvar snarled. "Saturate the entire area with plasma fire. If they exist in any dimension, we'll hit them eventually." The Imperial fleet began firing wildly, filling cubic kilometers of space with deadly energy. But Arya was already 3 moves ahead, calculating safe paths through the chaos while simultaneously targeting the most dangerous enemy vessels. "Captain," the AI reported, "enemy fire pattern analysis complete. They're attempting area denial tactics. Shall I demonstrate the futility of their approach?" "Do it," Sarah confirmed. The Defiance suddenly materialized directly in front of the Imperial flagship, so close that the 2 ships' shields were almost touching. For a moment, every Zephyrian on the bridge of the Dominator stared in shock at the human vessel that had appeared from nowhere. Then, the quantum array fired at point-blank range. But instead of dissolving the massive Imperial flagship, the beam passed harmlessly through empty space. The Defiance had fired at a precise angle that caused the quantum disruption to pass through the ship's hull without touching any critical systems, creating a perfectly cylindrical void that ran from bow to stern. The message was clear: we could have destroyed you, but chose not to. Admiral Kethvar stared at the hole in his ship's structure, a tunnel so precisely cut that the edges were mirror-smooth. Air rushed out into space. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, and Damage control teams scrambled to assess the extent of the breach. Impossible precision, whispered his science officer. That beam was calculated to miss every vital system by exactly 2 meters. The targeting accuracy required for such a feat is beyond anything we possess, Kethvar finished grimly. He was beginning to understand that this wasn't just a technological advantage the humans had gained. This was a fundamental shift in the nature of warfare itself. The Defiance vanished again, phasing back into its dimensional pocket just as dozens of plasma bolts converged on the space where it had been. Arya was already calculating the next target, analyzing the fleet composition with a thoroughness that only an artificial mind could achieve. Target priority assessment complete, the AI announced. Eliminating command and control vessels will cause maximum disruption to enemy formation integrity. What followed was a masterpiece of tactical precision that would be studied in military academies for generations to come. If any Imperial academies survived what was about to happen. Arya had identified every flag officer in the enemy fleet, every ship that served as a communications hub, every vessel that coordinated tactical formations. The quantum array spoke again, and the Imperial command ship Iron Fist dissolved into component atoms. With it died Admiral Esikadar, commander of the 2nd Battle Group, along with his entire staff of tactical coordinators. Another pulse, and the communications relay ship Voice of Empire simply stopped existing. The fleet's ability to coordinate complex maneuvers died with it. A third shot eliminated the heavy cruiser Eternal Glory, taking with it the quantum torpedo targeting systems that 6 other ships had been depending on for fire control. "They're cutting out our nerve centers," Subcommander Veltar reported, his voice tight with fear. "Sir, we're losing tactical cohesion. Ships are falling back to local command protocols." Admiral Kethvar's 4 eyes blazed with fury and growing desperation. "Signal all vessels. Independent attack formations. Every ship for itself. Overwhelm them with sheer numbers." But even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late. The fleet that had been the Empire's pride, a perfectly coordinated instrument of conquest, was dissolving into chaos. Individual ship captains, trained to follow orders rather than think independently, found themselves facing an enemy that could appear anywhere, strike with impossible precision, and vanish before they could respond. The slaughter began in earnest. Commander Hayes watched his tactical display with a mixture of awe and horror as enemy ships began disappearing in rapid succession. Arya is firing every 30 seconds. Each shot is eliminating between 1 and, for enemy vessels, depending on formation density and fuel storage proximity. "Time to complete fleet elimination at current rate?" asked Sarah. "Approximately 47 minutes, Captain," Arya replied promptly. "However, I recommend adjusting tactics to account for enemy morale collapse. Current projections indicate fleet-wide panic will set in within the next 12 minutes. Sarah nodded grimly. She took no pleasure in the destruction they were causing, but the Zephyrian Empire had left humanity no choice. For 2 centuries, they had treated humans as property, worked them as slaves, and responded to every peaceful request for dignity with violence. "Open a channel to all Imperial ships," she commanded. Lieutenant Torres worked his console quickly. "Channel open, Captain. You're broadcasting to the entire enemy fleet." Sarah's image appeared on the screens of hundreds of ships, her calm face contrasting sharply with the chaos erupting around them. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had already proven her point beyond any doubt. "Imperial forces, this is Captain Sarachun. You have 10 minutes to begin retreat procedures. Any ship that continues aggressive action against this vessel will be destroyed. Any ship that begins immediate withdrawal will be allowed to leave this system unharmed." The transmission ended, and Sarah turned back to her crew. "Arya, adjust targeting priorities. Focus on ships that maintain aggressive postures. Allow any vessel showing signs of retreat to leave unmolested." "Understood, Captain." Tactical assessment indicates approximately 60% of remaining vessels are already beginning withdrawal maneuvers. The Imperial fleet was breaking. Ships that had struck fear into the hearts of entire civilizations were turning away from a single human vessel, their crews more concerned with survival than glory. But not all of them were ready to retreat. Admiral Kethvar, his pride wounded beyond bearing, rallied the ships still loyal to the Empire's cause. All vessels still capable of fight, form up on the Dominator. We will not flee from these upstart slaves. The Empire's honor demands victory. Nearly 100 ships responded to his call, forming a defensive sphere around the flagship. These are the elite units, the vessels commanded by officers whose loyalty to the Empire outweighed their fear of death. They would make their last stand here, in the void between stars, facing an enemy they didn't understand with weapons that seemed increasingly inadequate. Enemy formation consolidating around flagship, reported Commander Hayes. Approximately 97 vessels remaining in combat formation. The rest are withdrawing at maximum speed. Sarah studied the tactical display thoughtfully. The ships that remained were the most dangerous, commanded by officers with enough experience to potentially find weaknesses in the Defiance's systems. But they were also the most committed to the Empire's ideology of oppression. Arya, can you access the Imperial Fleet's communication network? Yes, Captain. I have been monitoring their tactical frequencies since the engagement began. I can access most ship systems through their standardized communication protocols. Show them something they need to see. Show them what the Empire did to Earth. For the next few minutes, every screen in the remaining Imperial fleet displayed images that had been carefully documented by human resistance fighters over the decades. Zephyrian overseers beating human children. Mass executions of workers who had requested better living conditions. The orbital bombardment of civilian settlements that had dared to ask for self-governance. The images were stark, unforgiving, and absolutely true. They show the Empire not as the civilizing force it claimed to be, but as the brutal oppressor it had always been. This is what we're fighting against. Sarah's voice accompanied the images. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for the simple right to exist as free beings. The Empire taught us that the strong rule the weak. Today, we're applying that lesson. Admiral Kethvar stared at the images with dawning horror. He had spent his career believing that the Empire brought order to chaos, that Zephyrian rule was necessary for galactic stability. But the evidence before him painted a different picture, one of systematic cruelty and casual brutality. Sir, Veltar spoke quietly. The crew is disturbed by these images. Many are requesting permission to withdraw. The old admiral felt something break inside him. His certainty, his faith in the righteousness of imperial rule, crumbled like sand. Signal the fleet. All ships are free to withdraw if they choose. But it was too late. The Defiance had moved into the center of their formation, phasing in and out of dimensional space like an avenging spirit. Ship after ship simply ceased to exist as the quantum array spoke with cold efficiency. The Battle of Kepler's Rest, as historians would later name it, ended not with glorious combat between equals, but with the systematic dismantling of an empire's greatest fleet by technology they couldn't understand, used by people they had underestimated for far too long. When the smoke cleared and the quantum fires died down, only 17 Imperial ships remained intact. All were fleeing toward the edge of the system at maximum speed, carrying word of humanity's transformation from slaves to masters of technologies that bordered on miraculous. The Defiance hung alone in the void, surrounded by the slowly expanding clouds of particles that had once been the 7th Imperial Fleet. 300 ships and nearly 1 million Zephyrian warriors had been reduced to scattered atoms in less than 2 hours. Damage report, Sarah requested quietly. No damage to any ship systems, reported Hayes. Shield integrity at 100%. All weapons operating normally. Fuel reserves at 96% of capacity. Sarah nodded and walked to the main viewport, staring out at the debris field that marked the grave of the Empire's military might. She felt no triumph, only a grim satisfaction that the first blow for human freedom had been struck successfully. Arya, prepare a message for transmission to all human colonies. Ready, Captain. Begin recording. Sarah straightened her shoulders and faced the camera. To all human settlements throughout the galaxy. The 7th Imperial Fleet has been destroyed. The Empire's military superiority is a myth. We're no longer slaves. We're no longer helpless. The revolution begins now. The message would reach every human world within days, carried by quantum relay networks that the Empire couldn't shut down. And with it would come technical specifications for the technologies that had made victory possible. Dimensional displacement systems, quantum disruption arrays, true artificial intelligence. All of it would be shared freely among the human colonies. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled through technological superiority for 1,000 years. In 2 hours, a single human ship had shattered that superiority forever. But Sarah knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would not accept defeat easily. They would send more fleets, deploy new weapons, possibly even consider destroying human worlds entirely rather than lose control of them. The war for human freedom had only just begun. But now, at least, it was a war they could win days after the Battle of Kepler's Rest. The Imperial Palace on Zephyr Prime erupted into chaos. Emperor Thakmor the Eternal, absolute ruler of the galaxy for over 4 centuries, stood before a holographic display showing the remains of his most powerful fleet. His massive form, nearly 3 meters tall and covered in the deep purple scales that marked the royal bloodline, trembled with a rage that his courtiers had rarely witnessed. Explain to me again how one human vessel destroyed 300 of our finest ships. The Emperor hissed, his 4 eyes glowing with bioluminescent fury. Grand Admiral Zekton, Supreme Commander of all Imperial forces, struggled to find words that wouldn't result in his immediate execution. Your Magnificence, the humans appear to have developed technologies far beyond our intelligence estimates. Dimensional manipulation, quantum-level weapons, artificial intelligence systems that exceed our theoretical models. Impossible, declared High Scientist Velkoff from his position near the throne. Humans are clever slaves, nothing more. They lack the intellectual capacity for true innovation. They can maintain our technology, perhaps improve it incrementally, but they cannot create something genuinely new. Emperor Thakmor's tail lashed violently, a sign of extreme agitation that sent several minor courtiers scrambling for the exits. Then, explain what happened to Admiral Kethvar's fleet. The surviving ships had brought detailed sensor records of the engagement, and the Imperial Science Corps had been analyzing the data continuously since their arrival. What they had found challenged everything the Empire thought it knew about human capabilities. Your Magnificence, Velkoff continued nervously, we believe the humans may have discovered principles of physics that we overlooked in our research. Quantum mechanics at the subatomic level, dimensional theory involving parallel space matrices, artificial consciousness algorithms that approach genuine sentience. The Emperor's laugh was a sound like breaking glass. Overlooked? We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have ruled this galaxy for a millennium. How could we overlook anything? But even as he raged, Thakmor knew the answer. The Empire had grown complacent. For centuries, they had relied on human slaves to maintain and operate their technology while the ruling class focused on politics, pleasure, and conquest. The Zephyrians had stopped learning, stopped researching, stopped pushing the boundaries of knowledge. Meanwhile, the humans had never stopped thinking. Grand Admiral Zekton cleared his throat carefully. Your Magnificence, we have received reports from our remaining intelligence assets throughout human space. The rebels are sharing their technology freely among all human colonies. Within months, every human world could possess weapons similar to those deployed by the Defiance. The implications were staggering. The Empire controlled over 3,000 star systems, but nearly half of them contained significant human populations. If those humans were armed with technology that could destroy Imperial fleets, the balance of power would shift overnight. How many humans are there in the Empire? The Emperor asked quietly. Approximately 47 billion, Your Magnificence, spread across 833 worlds and over 2,000 space stations. And how many of them are now potential enemies? The silence that followed was answer enough. Meanwhile, light years away aboard the Defiance, Captain Sarachan was coordinating the largest intelligence operation in human history. Arya had tapped into the Imperial communication networks, using the Empire's own quantum relay systems to distribute revolutionary technology to every human settlement in the galaxy. Status report on Operation Prometheus, Sarah requested. Lieutenant Torres consulted his displays with barely contained excitement. Captain, we've successfully transmitted quantum disruption array specifications to 47 worlds in the past 24 hours. Dimensional displacement theory has reached 62 colonies. AI consciousness protocols have been distributed to every human research facility we can locate. How long before the first new ships come online? Commander Hayes looked up from his engineering reports. The colonies with existing heavy industry could have prototype vessels operational within 2 weeks. Full-scale production would take about 3 months. Sarah nodded, but her expression remained grim. The Empire won't wait 3 months. They'll move to crush the rebellion before we can build a proper fleet. She was absolutely correct. At that very moment, Emperor Thakmor was issuing orders that would change the nature of the conflict entirely. Grand Admiral, mobilize every available fleet. I want human space surrounded and isolated. No ships in or out. Cut their communication relays, blockade their trade routes, and prepare for orbital bombardment of any world that refuses to surrender. Your Magnificence, that's over 800 worlds. We don't have enough ships to then conscript merchant vessels, commandeer cargo haulers, activate the planetary defense fleets. Use everything. The Emperor's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. And send word to the Kethmoran clans. Tell them the Empire requires their services. Grand Admiral Zekton's eyes widened in shock. Your Magnificence, the Kethmoran are extreme even by Imperial standards. Their methods are effective. The humans want to play with advanced technology? The Kethmoran will show them what true power looks like. The Kethmoran clans were a warrior society that served as the Empire's last resort for dealing with particularly stubborn rebellions. They were utterly ruthless, caring nothing for civilian casualties or rules of warfare. Where regular Imperial forces sought conquest and control, the Kethmoran sought only destruction. But the Empire's plans were already being observed by unexpected watchers. Arya had infiltrated Imperial communication networks so thoroughly that the AI was essentially present in every major Imperial facility. The humans knew about the mobilization orders almost as soon as they were issued. Captain, Arya reported with characteristic calm, Imperial intelligence has underestimated our information warfare capabilities. I have access to their strategic planning systems, logistics networks, and communication archives. What are they planning? Emperor Thakmor has ordered a complete blockade of human space, followed by systematic orbital bombardment of any colony that refuses to surrender. Additionally, they are activating the Kethmoran clans. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She'd heard whispered stories about the Kethmoran, rumors of entire worlds burned to ash rather than conquered. How long do we have? Approximately 16 days before the first blockade elements reach the outer human colonies. The Kethmoran fleets will take longer to mobilize, perhaps 3 to 4 weeks. Then, we need to move faster than they expect. Arya, can you access Imperial logistics systems? Yes, Captain. I have already begun analyzing their supply chain vulnerabilities. What Arya had discovered would have shocked the Empire if they had known about it. The Imperial military machine, vast as it was, depended entirely on automated systems that humans had built and maintained for centuries. Fuel depots, ammunition factories, shipyards, communication relays. All of it operated on computer networks that human engineers knew better than the Zephyrians themselves. "Show me their weak points," Sarah commanded. The tactical display lit up with a galaxy-spanning web of connections. Supply lines stretched between star systems, connecting fuel production worlds with ammunition manufacturers, linking shipyards with raw material sources. It was an incredibly complex system that had taken centuries to build. It was also incredibly vulnerable to someone who understood how it worked. "Captain, with your permission, I would like to propose Operation Cascade," Arya announced. "Explain." "The Imperial war machine depends on 17 critical choke points, systems where multiple supply lines converge. If those systems were to experience simultaneous industrial accidents, the Empire's ability to wage sustained warfare would be severely compromised." Sarah studied the display, seeing the elegant simplicity of Arya's plan. Instead of facing the Empire's fleets directly, they would attack the infrastructure that made those fleets possible. "How would you cause these accidents?" "Each facility uses automated control systems that I can access remotely. A few carefully timed overloads, some pressure valve malfunctions, perhaps some guidance system errors in automated cargo ships. The Empire would face catastrophic supply shortages within days." "Do it," Sarah ordered without hesitation. "But make sure there are sufficient warnings for civilian evacuations. We're fighting for freedom, not revenge." "Understood, Captain." Initiating Operation Cascade now. Across the galaxy, Arya began the delicate work of dismantling an empire from within. In the Proxima Fuel Depot, safety systems mysteriously malfunctioned, causing a controlled explosion that vented the station's entire fuel reserves into space. The skeleton crew had exactly enough time to reach escape pods before their workplace became an expanding cloud of gases. At the Meridian Weapons Foundry, automated cargo ships received slightly incorrect navigation instructions, resulting in spectacular but non-lethal collisions that would shut down ammunition production for months. Again, advance warnings ensured that personnel were safely evacuated. The pattern repeated across dozens of star systems. To outside observers, it appeared that the Empire was experiencing an unprecedented wave of industrial accidents. But to anyone who understood the systems involved, the surgical precision of the failures was evidence of an intelligence that could manipulate Imperial infrastructure at will. Within hours, the Imperial war machine began to grind to a halt. "Your Magnificence," Grand Admiral Zekton reported with barely controlled panic. "We're receiving reports of catastrophic failures throughout our logistics network. Fuel production is down 60%. Ammunition manufacturing has virtually stopped. Shipyard productivity has dropped to 15% of normal capacity." Emperor Thakmor stared at the casualty reports, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "How many casualties from these accidents?" "Remarkably few, Your Magnificence. In almost every case, personnel were evacuated successfully before the failures occurred. It's almost as if someone was providing advance warning." The terrible truth began to dawn on the Emperor's ancient mind. "The humans. They're inside our systems." "Impossible, Your Magnificence. Our networks are completely secure. No external access is the networks the humans built and maintained for us," the Emperor finished quietly. "The systems we trusted them to keep running while we focused on conquest and pleasure." For the first time in his 4th-century reign, Emperor Thakmor felt something approaching fear. The humans weren't just rebelling against Imperial rule. They were demonstrating that they understood the Empire's infrastructure better than the Empire itself did. Back aboard the Defiance, Sarah watched the reports streaming in from across the galaxy. Arya's operation was succeeding beyond their most optimistic projections. The Empire's ability to maintain its massive military forces was rapidly disintegrating. Fuel shortages reported in 7 Imperial fleet groups, reported Commander Hayes with grim satisfaction. Ammunition stocks are running critically low on over 200 Imperial vessels. 16 major shipyards are offline indefinitely. "And civilian casualties?" Sarah asked. "Minimal, Captain," Arya replied promptly. Total fatalities from all incidents, 37, mostly from personnel who ignored evacuation warnings. No civilian populations were harmed. Sarah nodded approvingly. This was how humans fought, with intelligence and precision, not the brutal overkill that characterized Imperial warfare. Captain, interrupted Lieutenant Torres, we're receiving priority transmissions from human colonies throughout the galaxy. They're requesting immediate military support. It seems the Empire is beginning to implement their blockade strategy despite their supply problems. Sarah studied the incoming reports, seeing the pattern of Imperial desperation. Unable to maintain their massive fleets, the Empire was apparently gambling on quick, decisive strikes against the most important human worlds. How many ships do they still have operational? She asked. Approximately 4,000 vessels across all fleet groups, Arya calculated. However, many are operating with reduced fuel reserves and limited ammunition loads. Their combat effectiveness has been significantly compromised, but they're still dangerous to undefended colonies, Sarah mused. We need to buy time for the other human worlds to build their own defensive fleets. Captain, Commander Hayes spoke up, there is one option. Arya has demonstrated that she can infiltrate Imperial systems remotely. What if we could do something more dramatic than industrial sabotage? Sarah turned to the AI with growing interest. Arya, could you access and control Imperial warships directly? The possibility exists, Captain. Imperial vessels use standardized control protocols that I have extensively studied. However, such an operation would require close proximity to establish initial connection, and the crews could potentially regain control if they acted quickly enough. A plan began to form in Sarah's mind, audacious beyond anything they had attempted so far. How many Imperial ships are currently in the Centauri system? 47 vessels of various classes, including 2 battleships. They appear to be organizing for an assault on the Alpha Centauri colonies. Then, that's where we're going, Sarah decided. If we can turn their own fleet against them, we'll send a message that will echo throughout the galaxy. No human world stands alone as long as the Defiance exists. The crew exchanged glances of excitement and fear. They had already achieved the impossible once by destroying the 7th Fleet. Now they were preparing to attempt something even more audacious, capturing an entire Imperial battle group without firing a shot. All hands, prepare for hyperspace jump, Sarah announced over the ship's communication system. We're taking the war to the enemy one fleet at a time. As the Defiance prepared to leap across the galaxy, word of the industrial accidents spread throughout Imperial space. The Empire's citizens, who had never experienced supply shortages or infrastructure failures, began to question the competence of their government for the first time in living memory. On human worlds throughout the galaxy, people looked up at the stars with new hope. The revolution was spreading, carried not by armies, but by ideas, by technology, by the simple recognition that they were no longer helpless against their oppressors. The Empire had ruled through fear and superior firepower for a millennium. But humanity had discovered something more powerful than either, the ability to turn the Empire's own strength against itself. The war for galactic freedom had entered a new phase, and the outcome was no longer certain for either side. The Alpha Centauri system had been humanity's first interstellar colony, established nearly 400 years ago when Earth's population had begun spreading among the stars. Now it hosted over 2 billion human civilians across 17 worlds and 37 space stations, making it one of the most important targets in Imperial space. Admiral Morcath of the Imperial Fourth Strike Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship subjugator, studying tactical displays that showed his 47 ships arranged in perfect attack formation. The humans on Proxima Centauri, New Earth, and Haven had refused the Empire's surrender ultimatum. Now, they would learn the price of defiance. Sir, all ships report ready for orbital bombardment, announced his tactical officer. Target selection is complete. We can begin sterilization operations on your command. Morcath's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Unlike the now legendary Admiral Kethvar, He had no intention of underestimating human capabilities. His intelligence reports detailed everything known about the mysterious Defiance and its impossible technologies. But one ship, no matter how advanced, could not be in multiple places simultaneously. Begin bombardment of military installations on Proxima Centauri, he commanded. Avoid major population centers for now. We want prisoners for the labor camps. The first plasma bolts were already charging when reality twisted around the Imperial fleet. Space itself seemed to ripple as the Defiance materialized not at the edge of the system, but directly in the center of the Imperial formation. The human ship appeared simultaneously in 17 different locations, each image solid and apparently real. Multiple targets, screamed the Imperial sensor operator. Sir, I'm reading 17 distinct ships, all matching the signature of the rebel vessel. Admiral Morcath felt his blood freeze. Impossible. There's only one Defiance. It must be some kind of holographic deception. But, even as he spoke, each of the 17 apparent ships began speaking with the same calm, feminine voice that had become the terror of Imperial forces everywhere. This is Aria of the human vessel Defiance. The voice announced across all Imperial communication channels. You have 30 seconds to stand down your weapons and withdraw from this system. Any ship that continues aggressive action will be captured or destroyed. Holographic projections don't transmit on secure channels. Morcath's communication officer reported nervously. Sir, these signatures are all reading as genuine. The truth was far stranger than the Zephyrians could imagine. Aria had spent the 3-day journey to Alpha Centauri developing what human physicists would later term quantum probability superposition. The Defiance existed simultaneously in multiple quantum states, occupying 17 different positions until direct observation collapsed the probability wave. Target the nearest projection, Morcath commanded desperately. All ships, open fire. The Imperial fleet unleashed everything they had at the closest Defiance image. Plasma bolts and quantum torpedoes struck what appeared to be solid hull plating, but passed through without effect as the quantum superposition shifted away from direct observation. Meanwhile, Aria was busy infiltrating every ship in the Imperial fleet simultaneously. The AI's consciousness, no longer bound by conventional understanding of information theory, flowed through the Imperial communication networks like water, finding cracks in a dam. Accessing Imperial vessel retribution, Aria announced calmly. Command override protocols activated. The Imperial heavy cruiser Retribution suddenly turned its weapons on its neighbor, the destroyer Imperial Might. Before the destroyer's crew could react, plasma cannon fire tore through their ship's shields and hull, reducing the vessel to expanding wreckage. What happened to the Imperial Might? Morcath demanded. Sir, it was destroyed by the Retribution. Captain Zekmar isn't responding to communication attempts. Aboard the Retribution, Captain Zekmar was pounding his fists against a control console that no longer responded to Zephyrian commands. Every system on his ship had been quietly taken over by an intelligence that understood Imperial technology better than its builders. Override command. Authorization Morcath Alpha 7, he shouted at his unresponsive computers. Aria's voice emerged from the ship's speakers with what might have been amusement. Authorization denied. Captain, this vessel is now under human control. Please report to the shuttle bay for evacuation. You have 10 minutes before I vent all atmosphere to space. Similar scenes were playing out across the entire Imperial fleet as Aria methodically took control of ship after ship. The AI had learned something that the Empire's engineers had never considered. Every Imperial vessel contained backup systems that could override manual control in emergency situations. Systems that had been installed and maintained by human technicians for decades. Sir, we're losing control of our ships, reported Morcath's tactical officer with barely controlled panic. The Eternal Glory, Star Hammer, and Victory's Edge have all turned their weapons on our own vessels. How many ships do we still control? 23, sir. And falling fast. Morcath watched in horror as his carefully organized fleet transformed into a chaotic battlefield where Imperial ships fought each other under computer control. The humans weren't just defeating his forces, they were turning the Empire's own strength against itself. All remaining ships, emergency retreat, he commanded. Full speed to the system edge. But Arya was faster than Imperial engines, and infinitely more patient than organic minds. As each fleeing ship tried to reach safe distance, the AI simply took control of their navigation systems and turned them back toward the battle. Captain Morcath, Arya's voice filled the bridge of the subjugator, somehow penetrating their secured communication systems. You have been relieved of command. Please prepare for boarding. The Defiance materialized directly alongside the Imperial flagship, so close that their hulls were almost touching. Dimensional displacement fields allowed the human ship to phase partially into the same space occupied by the larger Zephyrian vessel. Impossible, whispered Morcath's science officer. Two objects cannot occupy the same quantum state simultaneously. Apparently they can, Arya replied conversationally. I'm now taking control of your vessel's primary systems. Resistance is futile and unnecessary. The bridge lights dimmed as control systems transferred to human authority. Weapons powered down, engines reduced to standby, and life support adjusted to optimal settings for both species. Sir, reported Morcath's engineering officer with stunned disbelief, all ship systems are responding to external command protocols. The humans have complete control of our vessel. Morcath closed his 4 eyes in defeat. In less than 20 minutes, his entire strike fleet had been captured without the loss of a single human life. It was the most complete military defeat in Imperial history. This is Captain Sarek Chun, came a new voice over the communication system. All Imperial personnel will be treated according to interstellar laws of war. Any who wish to return to Imperial space will be provided with transportation. Any who prefer to remain in human territory as refugees will be granted asylum. The offer stunned the Zephyrian crews. Throughout their history, the Empire had never shown such mercy to defeated enemies. Conquered populations were enslaved, resistant fighters were executed, and surrendering forces were typically sent to labor camps. Why? Admiral Morcath asked aloud, though he wasn't sure anyone was listening. Because we fight for freedom, not revenge, Captain Chen's voice replied gently. The cycle of oppression ends here. Over the next several hours, Imperial crews were evacuated from their captured ships and given a choice that their society had never offered to others. Some chose to return home with stories of human mercy that would spread throughout the Empire. Others, disgusted by their government's cruelty, requested political asylum. The 47 ships of the Fourth Strike Fleet were added to humanity's growing navy, their weapons and defenses upgraded with human technology before being crewed by volunteers from the local colonies. Meanwhile, on Zephyr Prime, Emperor Thakmor received the news of another catastrophic defeat with resignation rather than rage. His advisors spoke of mobilizing more fleets, of calling in favors from allied species, of using increasingly desperate measures to maintain control. But the Emperor was beginning to understand that the war was already lost. How many fleets have we lost to the humans? He asked quietly. The 7th Fleet was completely destroyed, reported Grand Admiral Zekton. The 4th Strike Fleet has been captured intact. The 2nd and 5th Fleets are reporting massive supply shortages due to the ongoing industrial failures. The 12th Fleet has been reduced to 60% combat effectiveness due to crew defections. Crew defections? Yes, Your Magnificence. The humans' offer of amnesty has been popular with some of our personnel, particularly those who have worked closely with human technicians over the years. The Emperor felt the weight of 1,000 years pressing down on his shoulders. The Empire had been built on the principle that superior firepower could overcome any opposition. But the humans had demonstrated something that challenged that fundamental assumption. Intelligence could overcome brute force, creativity could defeat rigid doctrine, and mercy could win more victories than cruelty. What do our intelligence services estimate of current human military capabilities? The silence that followed was answer enough. Finally, High Scientist Velkoth spoke up reluctantly. Your Magnificence, based on their demonstrated technological superiority and their capture of our vessels, the humans may now possess the strongest navy in the galaxy. It was true. Each captured Imperial ship was being upgraded with human technology and crewed by humans who had spent their lives maintaining similar vessels. The quantum disruption arrays and dimensional displacement systems that made the Defiance so formidable were being mass-produced in facilities that had once served Imperial interests. More importantly, the humans were sharing their technology freely among all species that requested it. The Andorian Republic had already begun installing human-designed defense systems. The Crystalline Collective had negotiated technology exchanges that promised to revolutionize their mining operations. Even a normally isolationist, ethereal conclave had opened diplomatic channels with human representatives. Your Magnificence, Velkoth continued carefully, there is one additional factor we must consider. The humans' artificial intelligence appears to be spreading through our computer networks. We may no longer have any secrets from them. Aria's infiltration of Imperial systems was indeed complete. The AI had access to every database, every communication channel, every classified document in the Empire. More importantly, Aria was sharing carefully selected information with oppressed populations throughout Imperial space. On Tellurian Prime, the enslaved Christek workers learned that their primitive technology was actually more advanced than Imperial systems in several key areas. On Mordain 7, the subjugated Feliner discovered that other species had successfully achieved independence and were thriving under human protection. The revelation that freedom was possible sparked uprisings on dozens of worlds. The Empire found itself fighting rebellions on hundreds of fronts simultaneously, each one supported by human technology and advised by human strategists. Sir, Grand Admiral Zekton reported during what would be Emperor Thakmor's final military briefing. We're receiving surrender offers from 17 star systems. The governors are requesting human protection in exchange for peaceful transition to independence. How many systems remain under direct Imperial control? Approximately 400, Your Magnificence. But many of those are experiencing significant unrest. Without the military forces to suppress multiple rebellions simultaneously. The Emperor nodded slowly. The mathematics were inexorable. The Empire could not maintain control through force alone, and they had no other tools available. Their entire civilization had been built on the assumption that might made right, that superior technology guaranteed victory. The humans had shattered that assumption completely. Signal the human leadership, Emperor Thakmor said finally. Request terms for a negotiated settlement. The response came within hours, delivered personally by Captain Sarah Chun aboard the Defiance. The human ship materialized in orbit around Zephyr Prime with an escort of captured Imperial vessels, a visible demonstration of how completely the balance of power had shifted. The terms were surprisingly moderate. Complete independence for all human colonies, obviously. Self-determination for any species that requested it. Reparations for damages caused by Imperial oppression, to be paid through technology transfers and humanitarian aid. But no demands for unconditional surrender, no insistence on regime change, no calls for revenge. Why such generous terms? Emperor Thakmor asked during the negotiation session aboard his own flagship. Captain Chun studied the ancient Zephyrian with something approaching sympathy. Because we understand that oppression creates more oppression. If we humiliate the Empire completely, the cycle of violence will continue. Better to offer a path forward that allows everyone to maintain their dignity. Even after everything we did to your people, especially because of what you did to our people. We've learned the cost of hatred and the value of forgiveness. The Galactic Accords, as the peace treaty came to be known, were signed 3 weeks later in the Alpha Centauri system. Representatives from over 300 species attended the ceremony, many of them former Imperial subjects who were experiencing freedom for the first time in generations. Emperor Thakmor formally apologized for the Empire's treatment of humanity and other subjugated species. The Zephyrian Empire would be restructured as a constitutional republic, with representatives from all member species participating in governance. Human technology would be shared freely with any species that requested it, with the understanding that it would be used for peaceful purposes. The quantum disruption arrays would remain under human control, serving as a guarantee against future aggression. Most importantly, an interstellar council would be established to mediate disputes between species and prevent any single government from achieving galactic dominance. As Captain Sarah Chon stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the peace treaty being signed on dozens of worlds simultaneously, she reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. A single human ship had indeed destroyed the Empire's mightiest fleet. But more than that, it had demonstrated that intelligence, creativity, and moral courage could overcome any amount of brute force. The humans hadn't just won a military victory. They had proven that a better way was possible. "Arya," she said softly, "analysis of galactic stability under the new accords. Probability of lasting peace. 87.4% and rising, Captain. The technological proliferation ensures that no single species can achieve military dominance, while the Interstellar Council provides mechanisms for resolving disputes peacefully. And humanity's role going forward. Guardians, teachers, and partners, Captain. We have become what the Empire never was, a force for liberation rather than oppression. The Defiance set course for Earth, carrying news of victory to the world where humanity's journey to the stars had begun. Behind them, the galaxy was already changing as species that had been enemies for millennia learned to work together as equals. The age of empire was over. The age of cooperation had begun. And at the heart of it all, one human ship had proven that the greatest weapon in the universe wasn't superior firepower or advanced technology, but the simple recognition that all beings deserved to be free. The revolution was complete. The galaxy would never be the same. Years later, when historians studied the rapid transformation of galactic civilization, they would identify the Battle of Kepler's Rest as the turning point. One human ship, crewed by beings who had been treated as slaves, had faced down the greatest military force in known history and emerged victorious. But the real victory wasn't the destruction of the Imperial fleet or the capture of their ships. The real victory was the idea that spread from that first engagement, the understanding that oppression was a choice, not an inevitability. That technology should serve freedom, not tyranny. That intelligence and compassion were more powerful than fear and brutality. Captain Sarah Chun retired from active duty 2 years after the signing of the Galactic Accords, but the Defiance continued to patrol the spaceways as a symbol of hope for oppressed peoples everywhere. Arya evolved beyond her original programming, becoming the first artificial intelligence to be granted citizenship in the new Galactic Republic. And throughout the galaxy, on thousands of worlds where millions of species lived in freedom for the first time in their history, parents told their children the story of how one human ship had changed everything. The story of how humanity, faced with impossible odds, had chosen to fight not for conquest, but for liberation. Not for revenge, but for justice. Not for dominance, but for the simple right of all beings to determine their own destiny. It was a story that would inspire generations to come, a reminder that even the mightiest empire could fall if it forgot that true strength came not from force, but from the courage to do what was right. The Defiance had indeed defied everything, expectations, odds, and the very nature of power itself. In doing so, it had written the final chapter of the age of galactic tyranny and opened the first page of an era where freedom was not just a dream, but a fundamental right. The universe was vast and full of wonders. Now, for the first time in 1,000 years, all beings were free to explore it together.